Good morning. Today we're going to talk about how to take those coils that we rolled and build them into something new. So when you get into building with your coils, it is a good idea, since we have limited workspace, to start out each day rolling yourself a nice little batch of coils. You don't necessarily need to start and try to make all of them for your project, but you definitely want to give yourself a stash. That way you don't have to constantly move back and forth, since we don't have a whole lot of elbow room. As you're making a stash, you'll see that I have one going here. I have it resting in damp paper towel so that the coils don't get dried out. I also have a sponge that I'm sponging water on as I go, because again, we don't want these coils to get dried out. So I have a nice little stash ready, and I am ready to start building with my coils. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get myself a base. I'm going to use a rolling pin for this. And I'm going to roll out a slab. Why am I using the rolling pin and not the slab roller? Well, our slab roller only rolls to one thickness, and it's just not thick enough to build a coil pot off of. A lot of people like to try and cheat and still use the slab roller. And they figure, oh, if I just take two slabs and I stack them on top of each other, that then it'll be thick enough. Which is a fine idea, except people forget to score and slip in between, and then there's air pockets inside. And when it goes in the kiln, half of the bottom blows off. So just roll it out, because then you can get it as thick as you want it. So this is going to be a fine thickness. You can cut it to whatever shape you want it. I am going to cut it to just a oval type shape. And this is my base that I'm going to start building with. Some tips and tricks for rolling out clay with a rolling pin. If you find that it's not moving when you roll, make sure you peel it up off of the board and flip it over, and then start rolling it again, and it should work just fine. So this is the base that I'm going to work with, that I'm going to build on top of. So to get this piece started, I am going to go around the edges, and I'm going to score all around the edges of my pot. And I'm going to take a coil, and I'm going to score along one side. And then I'm going to start adding slip. You're going to need to score and slip a lot when building with coils. Not necessarily between every row, but definitely between every 2 or 3 rows. And then I just lay my coil on top. You want to make sure that you're laying it directly on top if you want it to build up. I've got this extra, so I'm just going to cut it. And I'm going to save this piece because I could use it for a detail later. Now I'm going to go ahead and add another 2 or 3 layers, a layer or 2, before I start to smooth the inside. I find it easier to do that initial smoothing when I've got some height built in. So go ahead and add a second layer. Notice that this layer is starting and ending at a different place than the one below it. If I started all of my layers in one spot and all of the seams were in one spot, it would act like a zipper and it would just fall apart and open. So you want to make sure that you're starting each row at a different space so that you're distributing those weak points evenly around. Actually, that's going to be fine. So I like to start with 2 or 3 rings and then I smooth inside. For our purposes, we're going to smooth the inside entirely. We can make sure that everything is nice and well secured, and we can still see our awesome coil details on the outside. I find a metal rib works really well for this. Modeling tools work okay. So at this point, you can start to build however you need to according to your design. Things to keep in mind: if I stack my coils directly on top of the ones below them, my coil pot is going to go straight up. If I start to stack them just slightly wider than the ones below them, it'll start to bow open. And if I tuck them slightly inside, it'll start to come in. If you're doing a complex shape where you're getting it to open up wider or you're trying to pull it in, make sure that you're making those changes very, very little amounts at a time as you build each layer. That way it can support itself on the rows underneath. Okay, so I have finished building my coil pot. You can see from the time lapse the process. Some things to keep in mind. Notice or remember from the time lapse that I only built with coils. Some of my outer details I branched out a little, but the construction itself was made with coils. Remember, we're not using slabs or strips, only coils. The other thing you'll want to notice, I've smoothed out the inside. Now this could use a bit more cleaning. It's not 100% done, but the key thing to notice is that you can see the coil texture on the outside and it's going to be smooth on the inside, and that's how we're going to help make sure that we've got all of our coils 100% joined together. Obviously there are some exceptions. Make sure you speak to me with your design if you think you're one of them, but for the most part everyone should see coil textures on the outside and smooth on the inside. The other thing you'll want to keep in mind while you're building is the fact that, yes, I used the sponge to smooth, but I only used it on the inside. You did not see me wipe the outside. This is something that a lot of people do. They use the sponge to smooth the outside, especially around the bottom, and then they discover that their pot is stuck to the table. So it's helpful to build on a round or on a banding wheel, but it is also very important that you don't smooth your bowl to the table. And with that, we should be all set. Happy building.